Coming up in this week's Torah Pearls.
When did the law of the king become part of the Torah?
Which is it? Curses or the death penalty? Because you can't have both.
If the king is not supposed to multiply wives, why did David?
Does Deuteronomy 18 contain a closer rendering of the Moses scroll?
All right, Jono, this is a big one. We're going to have to jump in this thing. You ready?
Let's go. G'day, dear viewers, and thank you for your company once again here on truth2u.org. That's truth, number 2, letter U.org. I'm Jono Vandor, and joining me from the Horeb Institute in Louisiana is, of course, the author of the Moses Scroll, Ross K. Nichols. G'day, mate.
How are you, Jono? It's good to be here, my friend.
Doing pretty well. We are just steaming through Deuteronomy. We're not too far from the end of this whole thing, Ross. We, of course, are in the third season of Torah Pearls. We're picking up in Shofetim, which is the bulk of the middle of the Josianic reform, is it not, Ross? This is the law code of chapter 12 to chapter 26. And we are picking up in chapter 16, verse 18. We do have our AI critical scholar with us. That is Ezra. And Ezra, maybe you can kick us off with an academic overview, please.
Right before he does, let me just say, I have referred to this section as in previous classes working through the Pentateuch. I've taught this and I've called it the politics of God, meaning that within this Torah portion, and you have the prophets and the king and the priest or the Levites, and you know it represents sort of the governmental hierarchy of the religion of Israel, at least as it's presented in the law code. All right, didn't mean to cut you off there, Ezra. Give us an introduction.
Shofetim is a portion rooted in the Deuteronomic legal corpus, marking a shift from Israelite tribal customs to a centralized judicial and governmental structure. The text outlines roles for judges, priests, kings, and prophets, each framed with distinct boundaries to curb abuse of power. From a documentary hypothesis lens, much of this portion reflects the sources concern for covenantal loyalty and legal reform, likely compiled during King Josiah's centralizing reforms in the 7th century BCE. It serves to legitimize institutional authority while reinforcing that ultimate justice is tethered to Jehovah's law.
All right. Good.
Okay.
Very concise.
I like that.
I like that.
I like that.
Yeah, no,
I like
it's
that.
Okay. So King Josiah's centralizing reforms, 7th century BCE. The interesting thing about this that begins straight away, Ross, is that it starts in verse 18, you shall appoint magistrates and officials. You shall? Who is you? That is the first question I have.
Okay. Who is you? Who do you think it is?
Well, is this not Moses? Well, we're supposed to understand that this is Moses,
right?
Speaking to the people. Therefore, the you is the people, is it not? So he's saying to them, you are the ones who will choose officials and judges. You do that in your communities. It's almost like, if not exactly like, some sort of democratic procedure. They are the ones within their own communities that will choose, I guess, vote on who will be their representatives in that area, who will judge, who will magistrate and officiate and all that sort of stuff. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, just as an interesting point, when you said, who is the you, I wanted to look because there is a way that you can say in Hebrew, most of our viewers are very skilled and good Bible students, but there's a way in the Hebrew to say singular or plural. And in this particular passage, it's here in the Hebrew, it's at least singular. So it's that's the first thing that catches our attention, and it doesn't really help us all the time, because there are times where a text clearly must mean that it's being addressed to a group, and yet the Hebrew employs the singular, and that's the case here. So, but anyway, that's just the first thing I noticed. I don't know if that helps or hurts.
No, I'm glad you actually pointed that out, because we're going to encounter that again in this Torah portion, where the text in our Torah portion is referring to the plural in the singular, where other places in the Torah, speaking of the same event, refers to the people in the plural. But we'll get there soon enough. But judges and officials, Ross, don't we already have those? We already have those, right?
Right.
Speaking of other places in the Torah, it takes us to Exodus chapter 18, verse 21. Yitro is, in fact, let's go there, is saying to Moses, you take too much upon yourself. Come on, you need to delegate. Get some other guys to, judge the smaller matters and all this sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it says
you're going to wear yourself out, Moses. You're going to wear yourself out.
You're wearing yourself out, and it's unnecessary, dude. You got to delegate. Come on. 21. You shall also seek out from among all the people capable men who fear God, trustworthy men who spurn ill-gotten gain. Set these over them as chieftains, chiefs of thousands, hundreds, fifties, tens, and let them judge the people at all times, and so on and so forth. So this is Yitro's idea. Tells Moses, you got to do this. But then when we get to Deuteronomy and chapter 1, verse 13.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. What does that say?
I'm going there now, but I pointed this. We may have even brought this up when we went through this first time when we got into Devarim, but it is a good point. It's like the priestly material at times quite often doesn't match what we find in the Deuteronomist.
Doesn't quite match. And then what
Deuteronomy knows nothing about Jethro, right?
Doesn't know. And doesn't know anything. That's right. And so let's go from verse 12. Moses is complaining, right, of chapter 1, verse 12. How can I bear unaided? Oh, my goodness. The trouble of you.
Right.
He says that. The trouble that is you people. My goodness. You're doing my head in. How can I do this by myself? And the burden, oh my goodness, and the bickering, and we've got exclamation marks up to this. And then verse 13, pick from each of your tribesmen who are wise, discerning, and experienced, and I will appoint them. Now, this is a little bit different. He is saying to them, you pick them, right? It's on you, your tribes, and then I will impart upon them my authority. I will appoint them. Okay, so that's what we have there.
Now, let me go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, and I was just going to say, when we get back over to the way our Torah portion begins, again, Moses is saying, you choose within your communities, within your tribes, you choose the guys, right? But it doesn't say, and then bring them over to me, and I will appoint them. I will impart upon them the Mosaic authority. We don't have that here, right? What we have here is, good enough. You choose them, and they'll do that job, all right? And that's that. Now, what it suggests, Ross, is that the imparting of divine or Mosaic authority is no longer necessary. It's already done. We already have roots of an established priesthood. We already have roots of an established monarchy. We don't need to convince you all of the authority of that anymore. But what we do want is judges, magistrates, officials in your own communities. You guys pick those. Off you go. That's fine. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, the main thing is we not only have the two stories that you just highlighted, Exodus chapter 18, it's all the father-in-law, Jethro, Ruel, Hobab, the man with 1,000 names.
Many names.
It's not only his idea in Exodus, but here and in Deuteronomy, it's not Jethro. We don't even meet with Jethro in Deuteronomy. But we also have another story in the book of Numbers when it comes to the burden of leadership. How is that going to be distributed amongst the people? And remember, in Numbers, it's the Spirit. God's going to take some of the Spirit that is on Moses and put it on this group of specially selected people. The question becomes, how are they selected?
How are they selected?
How do we come about this? And you're right to point this out. By the way, one thing I was going to say is in the Torah tablet, which uses the ASV, this passage in Deuteronomy 1 says, verse 12, how can I myself alone bear your cumbrance and your burden and your strife? I like that. Page 4 of the Torah tablet. Yeah, it really comes down to we have different sources trying to explain a system that developed much later, and we have three different stories as to how the children of Israel have leaders that developed, and who put the people in charge? Who are these that are judging us? How did they get there? And you're like, well, let me tell you. And then there are these different stories of how that happened.
And either those stories either say, to your point, I'll put the spirit, I'll give you this magical spirit, and we'll dish it out this way. So it's divinely imparted upon them, the authority, or it's appointed Mosaic authority by himself to these particular leaders or whatever. Then you've got the 70 elders and all of this. You know the story about when they go and have lunch with God on Mount Sinai or whatever. Where did
Exodus
those guys come from?
24.
There. And there's various, they want to do it. But here, it's like, you all know that this is already established. It's here, it's now, it's happening. Josiah doesn't need to go further to convince the people. It's already ingrained into society. But when it comes to your communities, you guys appoint, it's necessary you have your own judges, all right? You take care of that.
Well, just one other point on that is, if you notice, it says, by the way, page 106 in the Torah tablet, judges and officers shalt thou make in all thy gates, which Jehovah thy God gives you according to your tribes and so forth. What most scholars point out about this, as to your point, is that this comes across as legal material for an already established system. So these in your gates, they're not gates in the wilderness journey as much as you would. That sounds more like a settled lifestyle, not nomads
gates
traveling
usually
to the
have
wilderness.
walls. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
I totally agree.
That's right.
Then we get into something completely different, Ross. We're now in chapter 16, verse 21. You shall not set up a sacred post, Ross. Don't do that. Any kind of pole beside the altar of the Lord your God that you may make, or erect a stone pillar, such the Lord your God detest it. Don't do it.
Yep.
What do you make
It's
of that?
An Asherah, and I like the way the ASV preserves that, an Asherah of any kind of tree beside the altar. Yeah, these pillars. Now, what's interesting, too, is that we don't get these prohibitions until now. Prior to this, and this is why it's so hard to weed out of the biblical narratives, is that when you see, for instance, you see Jacob and he anoints a pillar in Genesis 28, Genesis 35. It's you set up a stone, these various objects which are later forbidden here in the law code of Deuteronomy. No one ever tells Jacob. God didn't say to Jacob, I really wish you wouldn't do that. It just comes in later as an already, it feels like, and most scholars believe it is, part of this Josianic reform.
Yeah, very good. 17 verse 1, you shall not sacrifice to the Lord your God any ox, any sheep that has a defect of serious kind. One that isn't so serious, don't worry about it. But if it's of serious kind, Ross, don't you be offering that. That is abhorrent to Jehovah your God. All right. Then verse 2. And what we
did
get
we
into,
skip the stoning part? We didn't. Did we?
Haven't. No, we're about to stone people.
All right.
now.
Okay, I'm ready.
I think this is where we stone people. If there is found among you, Ross, in one of your settlements, the Lord your God is giving you, a man or a woman who has affronted the Lord your God and transgressed his covenant, and this is how, right? Verse 3, turning to worship other gods and bowing down to them, the sun, the moon, the stars, heavenly hosts, something I never commanded, and you have been informed or have learned of it, then you shall make inquiry. And if it is true, the fact is established that abhorrent thing was perpetrated in Israel, you should take that man or that woman that did that wicked thing out to the public place, and you shall stone them, that man or woman, to death. Don't just stone them a little bit, Ross. Stone them to death. A person shall be put to death only on the testimony of two or more witnesses. He must not be put to death on a single witness, and so on and so forth. But you've got to stone him to death. Now, we have mentioned this a number of times, but it's worth mentioning here again. There are, in the Moses scroll, corresponding curses to the 10 words. The first word is the prohibition against idolatry. There is a corresponding curse to that. And then you have the what we call the consequences of the curses and how that outworks in somebody's life, right? It is greatly elaborated. It is mentioned in Deuteronomy when we get back to the blessing and curse ceremony in chapter 27, 28. It is greatly elaborated there, but it is mentioned in, we may as well go there. It's 27, verse 15. It does say, is anyone who makes a sculptured or molten image abhorred by the Lord, a craftsman's handiwork, and sets it up in secret, and all the people shall say amen. That is the cursed man of the corresponding of the prohibition against idolatry. And then chapter 28 from verse 15 all the way to verse 68 is a greatly, greatly elaborated and expanded consequences of the curses. And it goes on and on and on, Ross. I mean, you are thoroughly and desperately cursed until you are just, it's the most horrible situation. But here, what we just read in 17, verse 2 to 7 is, there's no, don't worry about the curses. You're just dead. You're just going to be stoned to death. These are two incompatible outcomes, Ross. Your thoughts?
A couple of things. We've got, I just have in my notes that Deuteronomy expands stoning crimes. Deuteronomy is big on stoning, primarily in the law code. Idolaters, adulterers, false witnesses, rebellious sons, we'll get into that next week. These all demand not just cursed, but you have to be stoned. Now, let me bring in one other point. We keep talking about the comparison between Deuteronomy's law code and Josiah's reforms. If I can just go to 2 Kings 23, just briefly, when after the discovery of the scroll in 2 Kings 23, this is right after the covenant scroll is discovered, it says in verse 4 that the king orders the high priest Hilkiah, I'm just going to skip down, let's see, to bring out of the temple of the Lord all the objects made for Baal and the Asherah and all the host of heaven. See, this is right out of our Torah portion here. These are the things that are forbidden, right? He burned them outside Jerusalem in the fields of Kidron, and he removed the ashes of to Bethel. He suppressed the idolatrous priest whom the kings of Judah had appointed to make offerings at the shrines in the towns of Judah and the environs of Jerusalem, and those who made offerings to Baal, to the sun, to the moon, constellations, all the host of heaven. He brought out the image of the Asherah from the house of the Lord to the Kidron, and it goes on and on. If you look at the end of verse 7, the women wove coverings for Asherah. This is a major problem in the 7th century BCE. The problems that are particularly brought out in Deuteronomy in the law code, which we haven't had so much legal material against this until now, that's one of the reasons that the scholars go, it just sounds a lot like the situation in 7th century BCE.
And
Judah.
Doesn't it? Yeah.
It sounds exactly like it. I just wanted to bring that in.
I agree. Now, from verse 8, we have, if the case is too baffling for you to decide, then it basically this goes on to say, elevate it to a higher court. Is that the way that you read it?
Yeah. Yeah. Take it up the chain.
Office. Take it up the chain. That's a good way to put it. Just take it up the chain. Going back to Yitro, the case of Exodus chapter 18 and Deuteronomy chapter 1, does Deuteronomy chapter 1, does Moses say to them, look, if it's too hard for you, then take it up to me, with me, but otherwise deal with it yourselves? Is that the way that he...
I don't remember if it if it goes into all the detail of how to deal with the matters. Let's see.
It doesn't say, Go ahead.
Let's see. No, it doesn't go into that, does it?
Doesn't take it up the chain to Moses here in Deuteronomy, but it does, Yitro does say that,
Wait, no, it does. I'm sorry. Verse 17. You shall not respect persons in judgment. You shall hear the small and the great alike. You shall not be afraid of the face of man, for judgment is God's. And the cause that is too hard for you, ye, plural, shall bring unto me, and I'll hear it.
Excellent. Okay, so then both of those have it. Both Exodus 18 and Deuteronomy chapter 1 have that instruction, but they don't have it here. Why don't they have it here? Because they don't have a Moses. They don't have a Moses, Ross.
Interesting.
I mean, do they?
I was going
to... Just reading through
I see
it.
what you're saying. So you're suggesting that this is written at a time when that's not an option.
Seems to be the case, is all I'm saying.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that is interesting here is this idea that I have the place that God chooses, the place that Jehovah chooses. Yep. Jerusalem temple is retrojected into Mosaic law. So we talked about this last week, but in Deuteronomy only, and particularly in the law code from chapter 12 through the end of 26, first couple of verses of 27, what we're really dealing with there is material that's associated with the centralization of the cult. Now, there is a difference, by the way, where it talks about to stand before God. And what does that mean in Deuteronomy versus the priestly code? And let me ask Ezra that question. In other words, you almost get different. You bring these matters in, and you're to appear before God. What does that mean according to the Deuteronomist versus what we read in the priestly material elsewhere?
Great question. When the priestly material talks about standing before Jehovah, it's typically tied to cultic presence. Priests literally standing in the sanctuary, maintaining sacred space, mediating holiness, and performing ritual obligations. It's highly formal, spatially bound, and exclusive to the priestly class. In contrast, the Deuteronomist uses standing before Jehovah more broadly and democratically. It's about legal responsibility, covenantal loyalty, and communal access. Think of Levitical judges, or even kings being required to stand before Jehovah. It's moral and judicial accountability in action. The focus isn't sacred space, but right conduct under Jehovah's covenant. It's less about who you are and more about how you behave.
What do you make of that?
Well, I think it's mainly trying to, there seems to be a difference, and we're going to see this in various ways, in the material in Deuteronomy and the law code versus what we might find in the priestly text. And it's just little phrases that aren't quite worded the same, say, in Exodus as they would be in Deuteronomy, and what are the differences there? So I think it's right to at least take notice that there is seemingly a different reason behind these different rulings. So,
I'm now in chapter 17, verses 14, and I'm wondering to myself if before we read this section, we might read from 1 Samuel chapter 10. Is that the verse that I want to go to? Would it make sense that we do it in that order?
I think that's jumping ahead a little bit.
Oh, okay. All right.
But,
and then,
well, I was just going to say that what we get in Deuteronomy 17, I know where you're going, and there's different ways to do it, but it's interesting that this particular section is one that seems to suggest that the people are going to request a king like the nations, which doesn't sound like a good idea to me.
Right.
But it seems like this is being recorded, and most people would assume this is being recorded in the days of Moses. So it begins in 14, when thou art come into the land which Jehovah thy God giveth thee, and shall possess it, and shall dwell therein, and shall say, I will set a king over me like all the nations that are round about me. Thou shalt surely, Jono, set him king over thee, whom Jehovah thy God shall choose. One from among thy brethren shalt thou set king over thee. Thou mayest not put a foreigner over thee, who is not thy brother. Only he shall not, this is a rule for him, multiply horses to himself, nor cause the people to return to Egypt to the end that he may multiply horses. For as much as Jehovah hath said unto you, you shall henceforth return no more that way. Neither shall he multiply wives to himself, that his heart turn not away. Neither shall he greatly multiply to himself silver or gold. This makes you want to wonder, well, what's the good in being a king? All the fun stuff is,
all the fun stuff is taken out.
Yeah, verse 8. You want to keep going, or you want to?
Well, yeah, I suppose we can finish this section up to, what is it? It goes all the way to the end of the chapter, doesn't it?
Well, let me just paraphrase.
Mhm.
What's left is when he sits on the throne of his kingdom, this translation says he's going to write him a copy of this law in a book, or this Torah in a scroll, out of which is before the priests, the Levites. And it will be with him. He'll read it all the days of his life, and he'll learn to fear Jehovah his God, to keep all the words of this law and these statutes to do them, that his heart be not lifted up above his brethren, that he turn not aside from the commandment to the right or to the left, that to the end that he may prolong his days in the kingdom, he and his children in the midst of Israel. See,
Right.
I couldn't resist. I had to read it
Yeah.
all. This
Had to read
is called the Torah of the King. Now we have to break it down. But this is, again, presented as if this was
Mosaic.
put forward
This was,
in the wilderness.
was given by Moses. So this is,
That's
now,
right.
you and I have spoken about this a number of times, questioning whether or not this was in fact part of the original document, because it's only found here. It's found within the law code. It's certainly nothing in the Moses scroll that would suggest or necessitate a monarchy.
Right.
And it's not to say that a monarchy is necessarily a bad thing or anything like that. But is it divinely appointed is the question. And we have, whenever we talk about this, we go to Samuel, because we find that in Samuel chapter 8, the people demand of Samuel that he appoint a king. And Samuel feels hurt by this, and and God says to him in the story of 1 Samuel chapter 8, don't you feel bad, dude? It's not you that they've rejected. It's me. It's me that they've rejected from being king over them.
But do you think, I'm sorry, but do you think whenever Samuel responds the way he does, wouldn't that be an excellent place for Samuel to have said, well, I knew this day was coming.
Because Moses
and
said it.
Here it is. Moses said it. So Samuel doesn't know anything.
The people will say to Samuel, hey, appoint us a king like it says in Deuteronomy, appoint us a king like it says in Devarim,
right.
Appoint us a king like it says in the Torah. Because it says that we can, and it's just got to do it like this. So just do it like this because we want a king. Like the
We're
other
ready
nations.
for that.
We're ready for that. They don't do that. He doesn't do it, to your point.
Nobody knows about this text.
No one knows about it. And God says, not only have they rejected me as being king over them, but this is a wicked thing that they're requesting, is what it says in Samuel.
Sorry, but that would be an excellent place for then God to say, hey, Samuel, why are you upset? Because you knew that it says in Deuteronomy 17, verse 14 through 20, that this day was coming, and here we are. Relax. It's not optimal. It's not ideal, but I said that this would happen, and here it is. Why are you upset? He doesn't say anything like that.
It's clearly missing from the text that Samuel is familiar with, and from the text that Jehovah is familiar with in this chapter of 1 Samuel. But here's my question, Ross, and this is why I was wondering whether we should start with Samuel's Torah of the king, is because they're a little bit different, aren't they? Both of these are a little bit different. And my question is, and I don't know if you have an opinion on this, but in Deuteronomy, are we looking at perhaps a Josianic reworking of Samuel's Torah of the king? That would be my question. Because the way that it reads here, let's see, I guess, are we kicking off from chapter 8, verse 10?
That's probably about where it is.
Well, from verse 9, he says, God says to him, look, heed their demand, but warn them solemnly and tell them about the practices of any king who will rule over them. And Samuel reported all the words of the Lord to the people who are asking for a king, and he said, this will be the practice of the king who will rule over you. He will take your sons and appoint them as charioteers and horsemen, and they will serve as outrunners of the chariots, and he will appoint them as chiefs of thousands and as 50s, or they will have to plow his field and reap his harvest and make his weapons and the equipment for his chariots. And he's going to take your daughters as perfumers, cooks, and bakers. And
pretty bad days,
He will seize your choice fields and vineyards and olive groves and give them to his courtiers. And he will take a 10th part of your grain and vintage. Interesting, isn't it, that he will take a 10th? and give it to his eunuchs and courtiers, and he will take your male and female slaves, your choice young men, and your donkeys, put them to work, and take the 10th of the part of your flocks, and you shall become his slaves, basically. And the day will come when you cry out because of the king whom you yourselves have chosen, and Jehovah will not answer you on that day. You rejected him, and this is what he wanted. You're getting it good and hard. So, but the people would not listen to Samuel's warning. They said, no, we must have a king over us. Be like all the other nations. That's what we want.
Sure.
And so on and so forth. And so Samuel heard the people, who reported it to the Lord. The Lord said to Samuel, give it to him. Heed their instructions, appoint a king for them. And Samuel said, okay, well, you go home and we'll sort that out. What else do we have in that regard, Ross?
I just think all of these points, it's a warning. It's clearly something that caught everybody by surprise. Samuel not excluded from that surprise. And they have to come up with something. And we get the idea that once he lays out for them all the bad that potentially is going to come from this request, and they still want it, then that brings us to this 1 Samuel chapter 10 passage. And
what verse
did you have something before
there?
Verse 25 is where I was going to really
that's where I
pick up. The ASV says it this way. Then Samuel told the people the manner of the kingdom. In Hebrew, it's mishpat hamalucha, and wrote it in a book and laid it up before Jehovah. Now, what's interesting about this is if you read this and you look at it carefully and you look at the Hebrew, after he explains to them the rule or the manner of the kingdom, it says, Vayiktov Basefer. And it says that he wrote it in the scroll. He wrote it in the scroll and then caused it to rest before Jehovah. Now, that usually means, we talked a little bit about this just a minute ago, but before Jehovah in this text seems to indicate if you're going to write something in the scroll, what scroll are they talking about? It could be at least a hint that it was at least in the time of Samuel when the surprise happened. That's when it was added to a legal document in the scroll put before Jehovah, which would indicate this was some document that would be before Jehovah, which, according to the Deuteronomist, is the scroll of Moses, right? That's the way the Deuteronomist paints it. But remember, some of this Deuteronomic material seems to come in later in the time of Josiah. So what do we get? At the earliest, the rule of the king and the monarchy seems to come in Samuel's time at the beginning of the monarchy. This is my whole point. Certainly not Mosaic times, and you can date that, the time in the wilderness. People date it from, 1500 BCE up to 1200, however you do that. But we're talking about all the way up into, say, 1000 BCE. So this is, a couple of hundred years at a minimum.
Right. And what we have here, and if we're to understand that this is the law of the king that Samuel wrote out and sewed into the document that is the scroll, that it says you must not have many wives, multiply wives, lest your heart go astray, and so on and so forth, amass gold and silver and horses, and so on and so forth. Well, that sounds like the first thing that comes to people's minds when they read that is, hang on, didn't Solomon have like 1,000 wives, like 700 concubines, 300 wives, and even David, which is a bit more realistic and believable, didn't he have like 6 wives or something like that? Like, how many wives did he have? And certainly Solomon with riches but you see, Solomon was very, very wise and blah, blah. Really, tell us a little bit about that. How does that happen? It seems to be contrary to what we read.
Yeah, it really is. And it stands out. And there's an interesting passage in the Dead Sea Scrolls. And this is in the Damascus document. And, you can, any Dead Sea Scroll copy that you happen to have has the Damascus document. And there's this interesting argument, and we're talking about 4Q 266, 4Q 267, and it says there's an argument, basically, to give you the context, on how many wives can you have. And the Qumran community is debating this in this document, and here's what it says. They're suggesting that only one wife is ideal, right? And so it says, for instance, even though the principle of creation, he's referring to Genesis 1:27, male and female, he created them. And the ones who went into the ark went in 2 by 2 into the ark. And about the prince it is written, this is a reference to Deuteronomy 17:17, he should not multiply wives to himself. However, this is the interesting part, David had not read the sealed book of the Torah, Sefer HaTorah, which was in the ark, for it had not been opened in Israel since the days of the death of Eleazar and Joshua and the elders who worshiped and so forth. Okay. Now, the reason that I find this striking is the argument is, well, ideally it should be one man, one woman, right? That's the way it should be. And someone there said, well, wait a minute. Why then David, the man after God's own heart, had multiple wives? Well, it's because he didn't read the sealed book of the law. Now, the sealed book of the Torah is an interesting study, and I believe that at least what they're alluding to is they know that there is this idea, we know it in Deuteronomy 31, where the scroll of Moses is finished to the very end, and it's put mitzad HaTorah, in Ha'aron, in the side of the ark or whatever, and they're saying that had been sealed up from the time of the death of Joshua. Now, what's fascinating is at the end of Joshua is one of the last times that it's mentioned that the scroll is mentioned. And it's not mentioned really again until we see it at the discovery in the days of Josiah. So anyway, I find this to be, they're trying to explain why David does not seem to know that you can't have more than one woman. The most logical reason for David, there are two answers. David either said, I know it says that I shouldn't multiply women, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
Because I'm the king, and what fun is there being a king if you can't do what you want?
Can't have many women, yeah.
And so that's one option. Well, I don't like to think like that. I like to think that David is a man after God's own heart, and he just doesn't know it. Well, that's the angle that the community writing the Damascus document, they went with that one. They said he just didn't know because the real Torah had been sealed up. And I think maybe that's true. David didn't know this rule.
Interesting. Now, look, before we get off this, I do have another question, Ross, and that takes us to chapter 17, verse 18. And tell me what it says in the ASV, because here I have in my Jewish study Bible, when he is seated on his throne, he shall have a copy of this teaching written for him on a scroll by a Levitical priest. What does yours say?
In the ASV, and it shall be when he sitteth upon the throne of his kingdom, that he shall write him a copy of this law in a book out of that which is before the priest, the Levites, and it shall be with him, and he shall read therein all the days of his life, and so forth.
So, for those that didn't catch that, there is a difference.
There is a difference.
Says he will write himself a copy of the Torah that is before the Levitical priest. The other one says he shall have basically have a scribe or Levitical priest write him a copy of this law.
Right.
Which one do you think is more accurate? Your Hebrew is better than mine. What do you make of it?
I tell you, I was going to go. This is a major argument, by the way, and I was going to look and see. Yeah, it really is. Here is what it says. Let me just make sure. I don't want to read a lengthy note, but I want to see if the Jewish Study Bible notes on this. Okay.
There is a note, yeah.
Deuteronomy
Yep.
requires the king to have a copy of this teaching written for him. That's what this note says. The king must daily read the law that limits his power. The literal Hebrew phrase, a copy of this teaching, Torah, provides the basis, this is interesting too, for one of the two ancient Jewish designations of the book. One title is Sefer Devarim, the book of words, short for the book of these are the words, and it goes on to say, the second ancient rabbinic title based on this phrase was Mishneh Torah. This was translated into Greek by Philo in the Septuagint as Deuteronomion, which is the source of the book's familiar English title, Deuteronomy.
Right.
Now, the question is still open.
It is.
Is it that the priest is to write for himself a copy, or is he going to have written king for him? Yeah.
So does king write it, or does the priest or scribe write it for the king? And the other question is, do they write a copy, or do they write two copies? Well, I guess they have an original copy, and they write a copy of the original or the more original one. Now, the reason why I asked this, Ross, and you know this, but it's because we have the Moses Scroll. The Moses Scroll was discovered in the Wadi Mujib in what was it, 1865 roundabouts, and it was discovered in duplicate. The interesting thing about this is that not only do we have two copies, or we had two copies of this scroll, and a fragment of a third copy even, but we're also to understand from those who analyzed it in 1883 that they were in two hands, two different handwritings. So clearly one is a copy of another, it would suggest. What are your thoughts?
That's an excellent point. I've thought about that. I wonder, and we don't really have a way to know. We do know that relying on the eyes of those who saw it, clearly, like you said, it was two different hands. We don't know. I wish they would have been more careful until we find it. I wish they would have been more careful to say, one of these had the opening, these are the words which Moses spoke. In other words, what if one of these didn't have that? What if if one of them just had, God said to me, you've been at this mountain long enough, and then the other one said, these are the words that would let us know that one perhaps was an original, the other a copy. We just don't know.
We don't know.
But what we do know is that we have two almost exact copies, and it makes you wonder if there is a connection here, either real or intended, like they knew when they found the scroll, either they developed a law which said you're going to make a copy of this, or maybe it was already a rule when it was discovered, and this represents two copies.
Well, what I wonder is this the document that was discovered, the Moses Scroll in 1865 by the Bedouin in the cave in the Wadi Mujib, was it placed there for safekeeping because it was an official monarchical copy? Like maybe this is it, and we've got to take it now, and because the Babylonians and so on and so forth, we've got to hide it over here. I don't know. It's a possibility, I guess.
Hey, I don't want to misrepresent his position, but our friend Barry Page, who is also a big fan of the Moses Scroll and the author of a couple of books on recently, with his understanding of the Moses Scroll as part of his book. And one of the things that he has suggested, and again, I'm just giving you sort of a snapshot of that, there is not too far from the location where we believe the scroll was discovered. In other words, we know that it was high up in a cliff in the Wadi Mujib. We know it's about 30 minutes east of Aurora, very close to what would have been a priestly town across the Jordan. Now, the question becomes, what if when the scroll was discovered, copies were made and distributed to these priestly towns? Now, this is pure speculation, but it does make sense to me. These two copies could be representative of copies that were distributed. The other option, the option I took in the Moses Scroll, is one that I felt like maybe these were straight from the discovery in the temple in the days of Josiah, perhaps one the original, one a copy, and it was smuggled east on the way out.
I am inclined to go with the latter, even though I'll tell you, Barry put that in the book off the back of a conversation that he and I had very early on, and that conversation was off the back of a conversation that you and Daniel Wright and I had, and it was Daniel's speculation that hey, did you know, you guys, that this is a placement in a Levitical town? It's possible that this and that. Perfectly.
That's right.
plausible.
Yeah. Daniel Wright. I forgot about his input
absolutely.
On that.
And we talked about that with Barry, and Barry thought, makes sense to me, going to put it in the book. But I had to say I warmed to the idea of the latter, and maybe it's just because I want it to be so. We really don't have anything more than that, but the speculation of what we like the best. But we go back to, what is it, 2 Maccabees chapter 2, where it talks about Jeremiah taking a bunch of the sacred stuff from the temple, heading over the Jordan to the caves where no one knows exactly where he put it. We think maybe around Nebo or whatever, but maybe he just went further and hid some of the stuff in various caves. Yeah. And this might have been one of them. Love the idea of that. And to me, that makes more sense. Yeah.
Right. Either way, it's interesting, and I'm glad you brought that up about the two copies. And just so make sure the viewers don't miss this, it's important that this is one of them. It is the main reason that Deuteronomy is called Deuteronomy, because of how that word in the Greek represents a second law, Mishneh HaTorah, a copy of this Torah. Again, by the way, the phrase "this Torah," I think it appears in one priestly text, but otherwise it only appears in Deuteronomy over and over. HaTorah Hazot, HaTorah Hazeh.
I looked that up.
Yeah, it's very interesting, isn't it?
This Torah.
It's referring. It is a third person, by the way, reference to the Torah. And it lets us know, it's like in the Bible where it talks about the book of the wars of the Lord, or the scroll of the wars of the Lord. We don't have that anymore, but we have a mention of it. We have a source, a text which is telling us that source once existed. In Deuteronomy, in the sections where it's third person, or it's not first person for sure, that's where this phrase, this Torah, appear. It's as if a later writer is recalling that this story is based on the original.
Yes, quite right. And that popped out at me, and I thought, that's interesting. Does that, I had to go to the Hebrew because I thought, is that the Torah or is it this Torah? But Torah Hazot. And I thought, okay, well, there it is. All right. Used mostly in Numbers, I think. Pops up about 7 times, if I remember correctly. But anyway, all right. Now, chapter 18, a lot of interesting stuff in chapter 18, but it kicks off with, don't forget, Levites are special. So the Levitical priests, the whole tribe of Levi. Now, there we go. So the tribe of Levi, that's actually, you know what? I think I'm confusing 2 searches that I did, and I think tribe of Levi or sons of Levi is what I'm thinking of when I'm talking about it appearing 7 times in Numbers. That's another interesting phrase search.
That's right. That's okay.
Shall have no territorial portion with Israel. Let's stop there for a second, because I'm constantly reminding the viewers that in the Moses scroll, and this is Idan Dershowitz that picked this up, Levi, there's no Levi, there's the Levites. The Levites are not treated as tribes. They're not referred to in the same way as the 12 tribes are, and there are 12 tribes. And as I'm constantly reminding everybody, there are conflicting or competing lists of tribes. There are the 12 that include Joseph and Levi. There is the 12 that includes Ephraim and Manasseh. The Moses scroll uses the latter. So that is the reason why the Levites do not have land, because they are those who accompany Israel, if you like. The Levites are those who accompany Israel, who are not by blood part of the tribes. The Levitical priests, the whole tribe of Levi, shall have no territorial portion with Israel. That's why they don't. They shall live only off the Lord's offering by fire as their portion, and they shall have no portion among their brothers' tribes. The Lord is their portion, as he promised them. So this is the best that they can do. They have laundered themselves by now into Israelite society as a tribe, but they don't have, they haven't inherited land. They don't have a covenant with land in the same way that the tribes of Israel do. And so this is the way that they deal with that. So
now, when you bring this up, though, let me jump in. When you bring this up, a lot of people might be taken back by this because you.
Well, I was taken back by this, Ross.
Well, I know, but you've studied it for a couple of years. My point is that they might be a little bit confused. Let's bring Ezra in. I'll tell you why. Because there is a lot of academic material out there that suggests, because what most people are thinking is, hang on, what about Genesis chapter 30? And it says that Leah had one of the sons is Levi. And, everything is built on this idea that Levi is a tribe. So one of the big questions is, where do scholars get the idea that the Levites might be something other than one of the 12 tribes? And how does that come in, and what's the story there? So that's one point, and I'd like to get Ezra to help us with that. And then the second part of this question that I think we can touch on is how, in most of the Pentateuch, we distinguish between the regular old Levites like you. You're a Levitical descent. You know this from your family line. Yeah. So now, how does someone like you differ from someone who claims to be a son of Aaron? So in the Pentateuch at large, you have the sons of Aaron. They're the priest. And the Levites, you get to carry the stuff for us. And we'll cover it so that you don't get struck down. But they're not real. The Levites aren't real priests. But Deuteronomy doesn't make that distinction. So Ezra, help us sort some of this out. How do we think that we got to the point where the Levites were part of the tribes? And then secondly, what's the difference between the sons of Aaron and the Levitical priest between the Pentateuch and Deuteronomy? Help us out.
Academically, many scholars argue the Levites weren't originally a biological tribe, but a professional class of cultic functionaries who became attached to Israel's emerging religious system. The etymology of Levi possibly links to the Hebrew root lava, to attach, suggesting they were joined to Israel, perhaps as outsider priestly groups assimilated during different historical phases. Later traditions, particularly in the priestly source, retroactively constructed tribal genealogies, most notably in Numbers, to grant them ancestral legitimacy and a divine origin story, giving this class institutional permanence. As for the Levites versus the sons of Aaron, the priestly material makes a hard distinction. Only Aaron's sons are true priests who can offer sacrifices. The Levites serve as temple assistants, gatekeepers, musicians, transporters of sacred objects. This hierarchy reinforces a rigid cultic order under central authority. Deuteronomy, by contrast, knows nothing of this stratification. It speaks only of Levitical priests, hakohanim haleviim, blurring the lines. There's no mention of Aaron or his sons, and the priestly role is more communal and less centralized. This aligns with Deuteronomy's broader theology, less emphasis on ritual purity and more on covenantal faithfulness, law, and moral conduct.
What do you think about that?
Good. No, I do. I think that's a pretty good summary. I like that, actually. It's not bad.
Now, let me add one thing that when I first heard this, I didn't respond favorably to it. Sometimes when we learn things, and I'm still studying this matter out, but I remember when I first kind of got this idea, it was from a book by Richard Elliott Friedman on the Exodus. I think you've read that as well. And one of the things that really hit me in that book, and I had to put it down and really think about it and dig deeper, and then you picked this up and really tore it to pieces, meaning you dug in deeper, much deeper than I.
Only because, but I hated you for it at the beginning because, as I've mentioned before, I was quite, chuffed with my Levitical status. and I'll just say that I said to Idan, look, this is really annoying to me, actually, because it's making sense. And yet, my father's line is Levitical. And he said, oh, I know it. He said, my mother's line is Levitical. So neither he nor I really enjoyed this.
You don't benefit from bringing this up.
I benefit from bringing it up. But you, before I had to wrestle with this, due to the Moses scroll and what Idan puts in his book. You, as I've mentioned before, you were poking me in the eye with this stuff from Richard Elliott Freeman.
I did have fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, keep going.
And part of it is I love you, and you're one of my best friends in the whole world of all time. And I know that you were so pleased to be a Levite, and you would joke with me about being a Viking, and remember all that. That's right. But I was a little bit jealous because here you are a Levite. Now then,
I was a little bit jealous
when I read this though. When I read this, and I noticed that one of the points that Richard Elliott Friedman made really hit me. And that is this piece of evidence. It's only a data point. People can do with it what they want. But the data point is this. The idea is that if Israel as a nation, as a people, spent time in Egypt, you would expect that cultural transmission to be evident. Yeah, influence. Yeah. You would expect that there would be people named after Egyptian names. And we see that. And so he kind of built the case in his book. He said, you would expect it, you find it. And so I'm thinking, yeah, that's good. And then it said, but what is interesting is that we have 13 names in the Pentateuch which are Egyptian, and only 13 names. And those 13 names, Jono, all of these 13 names, not any other, are all Levites. So
Levites,
you have,
that's right, yeah.
Yeah, Levites, only Levites have Egyptian names. Now, here's what's interesting. This is where it really began to make sense in my mind. There are quite a few studies, very good and worthwhile studies, that suggest that a lot of the cultic, priestly, ritualistic material that we find in the Pentateuch, which the word is bleeds over into the rest of the Bible, literally bleeds over into the rest of the Bible, because it's all about sacrifices and so forth. It has a whole lot in common with Egyptian religion. So then the wheels start to turn. You go, wait a minute. 13 names of Egyptian names in the Pentateuch. All of these are Levitical. Then maybe, to Richard Elliott Friedman and some of these other academics, their point is maybe the Levites were originally an Egyptian people. So anyway,
this takes me back just to your point, and I mentioned this at the time when we were working our way through it, and you can remind me where it is. But the stoning of the blasphemer, the situation with the blasphemer,
Leviticus 24.
Thank you. And he is of Egyptian descent. Patrilineally, his father is Egyptian. His mother is from Dan. He went out with the men of Dan and to claim land or whatever it is, and they're like, dude, you're Egyptian. You're not. This doesn't apply to you. At which point he curses the name of God. But he is clearly if you like, a Levite, one who has attached himself, who travels with, who is a companion of with the Israelites. So this is the way that the theory runs. I'm reluctantly compelled by it. So we find ourselves anyway in Deuteronomy 18, and it is establishing, regardless of what you've heard in the past and how this all worked out, just trust me now, they are priests. They are appointed by God. That which is God's portion is now the Levites' portion. They are to benefit from the sacrifices. They get to eat of these things. If a Levite would go into any of the settlements where Israel is residing, then he may do so wherever he pleases. He may serve in the name of Jehovah his God, like all his fellow Levites who are in attendance before Jehovah, and they shall receive equal shares of dues without regard to personal gifts or patrimonies. Okay, that is them. Moving on, and then we get to verse 9. When you enter the land that your Lord your God is giving you, shall not learn to imitate the abhorrent practices of those nations. Let none be found among you who consign his son or daughter to the fire, or who is an augur, a soothsayer, a diviner, a sorcerer. An augur, I don't know that I've ever used that word before. One who casts spells or who consults ghosts or familiar spirits, one who inquires of the dead. It is an abhorrent thing. Ross, don't be doing any of that. But what's interesting to me about this, and then I don't know that we have time to go there now, but you can read about such an individual in 1 Samuel chapter 28, Samuel is dead. God is no longer speaking to Saul. He's trying to figure out what he's supposed to be doing because he needs some direction. No one's giving him any sort of divine inspiration here, and he decides to go and consult with a witch, the witch of Endor. And she, supposedly, we're to understand, brings up the ghost of Saul and Samuel. And Samuel's like, why are you disturbing me, dude? Whatever I was doing in Ghost World. And there is Samuel in his ghost clothes. It's a bit of a giveaway whenever there are ghost clothes. The other question, of course, is who recorded this? Who relayed this information? Because the next day Saul is dead, and his sons. So it's a cool story. It's, I think, maybe the only ghost story in the Bible. But here it's saying, don't be doing it. But it seems to acknowledge a belief in these entities, Ross. I don't really believe in ghosts. What do you reckon?
I don't necessarily believe in ghosts either. I tell you, it is. We may be exceptions to the rule. Maybe a lot of people do, but it's. Well, let's put it this way. Let me say it this way. I've never encountered one, and so it's hard to. And let me add this. I don't want to encounter one. If there are,
rather not. Yeah.
I'm not gonna conjure one up either, though. No. I would add that. So, but one of the interesting things, and we'll have to do this in another time probably, but, the Bible doesn't say, in the Bible as we have it, doesn't say that you're not able, that it's not possible to communicate with those who are among the non-living. It just says not to. And so I kind of stick with that rule.
And yet, and I'll throw this into the mix, and people can do their own research on this because we certainly don't have time to do it now. But this was the technology, if you like, that the Methodists were hoping to harness, and which caused them to split off from the Anglicans in the 1700s. They wanted to be the ones who could perfect, via the seance, communication with the other realm or the world beyond or the life after. And they really thought, probably based on verses like this or verses in 1 Samuel chapter 28, chapters like that, that this was a possibility. And so they were desperately seeking. There's a particular case, if I remember correctly, called the Cock Lane Ghost. You can look at the great wiki on that, I think, the Cock Lane Ghost. But in any case, that is that. Let's move on from there.
Wait, one more thing. The interesting piece that makes it, you did this, you laid it out perfectly. I'm sure it was all by purpose, but when Saul really wants to communicate with God, he's got several options on the table. He's got the Urim and the Tumim. He tries that. It doesn't work. He tries this, tries that. Can't prophet? No, can't. So what does he do? He resorts to these things. So what Deuteronomy 18 says is, don't do any of these bad things, which, Saul is going to try. He tries the good things first, the things that are authorized in the Bible, but he was unsuccessful. So then he resorts to these things. What this does is it flips that. It says, don't do all the bad things, including consulting witches and ghosts and goblins and so forth. But there's going to be a way that you, righteous people, can have that link between you and God. You don't have to be like the Methodists and search for these ways to do a seance. You're going to have what, Jono? How are you going to do it? You're going to have a prophet.
No. Yeah, I'm going to have a prophet, and that's what we're going to go into. Now, that, unfortunately for Saul, wasn't the case. His prophet was dead, and there wasn't another prophet risen up like Samuel that he could consult.
That's right.
And that was his problem. But to your point, this is where we're at now. Chapter 18, verse 15, the Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet from among your own people like myself. This is Moses supposedly speaking, or so that Josianic reform wants us to believe so. Him you shall heed. It's always bothered me, I have to say, because it's ambiguous. Who is this prophet? How are we supposed to identify this prophet? And there was a time when I thought, no, this is clearly Joshua is who this is talking about. But then you suggested to me, maybe it could be Jeremiah, and maybe it could be Jeremiah. Right. Who is it referring to? This is just what you asked of the Lord your God at Horeb, apparently, on the day of the assembly, saying, let me not hear the voice of the Lord my God any longer, or see this wondrous fire any more, lest I die. Whereupon the Lord said to me, they have done well in speaking thus. That is verse 16 and 17, Ross. And the fascinating thing about those verses, I'll just throw into the mix, is that what we have here is the Josianic reform, or the Josianic reform is the law code, seemingly quoting from the Moses scroll. And if we go back to look at the quote, what we see is it takes us back to Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 25 in the Hebrew, 28 in the Christian Bible.
Right.
And it doesn't read exactly like that. When we look at the Moses scroll, it better corresponds with, I think it's Exodus chapter 20, verse 16, right?
Okay, yeah.
And the interesting thing is that this here might be quoting from, it seems like Deuteronomy has been sort of reworked or edited, redacted a little bit, or expanded upon, whereas this document, this segment in Deuteronomy chapter 18 seems to be reading from that portion before that was done. So if I go, for example, to Exodus chapter, 20 verse 16, what it says in this regard is, all right, so so all the people witnessed the thunder and the lightning and all this sort of stuff, and they stood back at a distance, and they came up to Moses in verse 16. They say, you speak to us, they said to Moses, and we will obey, but let not God speak to us lest we die. In other words, this is absolutely freaking us out. Now, this corresponds pretty reasonably to what can be detected in fragment F of the Moses scroll, because it's super fragmented, it's difficult, but there are letters there that certainly give us clues that that's a fair enough rendering. But then we go over to Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 25 in the Hebrew.
Yep.
And it says like this, the Lord heard the plea that you made to me, and the Lord said to me, I have heard the plea that this people made to you. And it seems redundant. It's saying the same thing twice.
Two different ways, yeah.
Yeah, two different. Moses is recalling, and then he is quoting. It's like, but why, dude? And then the Lord says, they did well to speak thus. Well, within the room that we have, and I know I'm going into too much detail here, but within the room that we have to reconstruct fragment F, column A, which was very difficult to read, what we have in Deuteronomy chapter 18 actually fits better. It's a little bit shorter. It doesn't have that redundant information. Just fits in there a lot better. So this may be a closer reading of that portion is all I'm saying.
Yeah, and I think you're right to bring in the Exodus 20 passage, Deuteronomy 5, and Deuteronomy 18, and you mesh those together and you study those three texts, which you and I have done, horizontally, where you put them and you look at the language there, and then you look at the Moses scroll. The one correlation that we find between Deuteronomy 5, as we have it in our Bible, and the Moses scroll is there's this one phrase, as you pointed out, it was just fragmentary. I didn't have Edon Dershowitz' book because my book came out before his, but I remember when I saw the phrase mi yitain in Hebrew in just 5 letters, it basically said, wait a minute, I know that phrase, and it was here in Deuteronomy 5 where it says, translated into English, oh, that they had such a heart in them as this, that they would fear me and keep my commandments always. And I said, oh, wow, this is perfect, because in the Moses scroll, it comes at about the right place. So then I began, we were speculating. I remember we spent hours and hours and hours on this. What could F have in it? And maybe it's this idea of the prophet. Whatever the case, from this point forward, remember last week we said Deuteronomy 13 talks about a false prophet before we ever have a prophet. But I have one thing that I'd like to throw at the viewers that really hits me harder than any of that, and that is this. At what point did we start referring to that person who conveys a message from God to the people and who's responsible to carry a message from the people to God, let's say, where do we start calling this person a Navi? In Hebrew, a Navi is a prophet. We get one text in Genesis 20 where Abraham, verse 7, is a Navi, and he's going to pray for you, Abimelech, so that you don't die. That was the only, and then you don't see it again until you see it maybe in Numbers chapter 11. Very few. Now all of a sudden we see it. But here's what I want to do, Jono. Go look at 1 Samuel chapter 9. 1 Samuel chapter 9 and verse 9. We spent a lot of time in Samuel tonight. I really love Samuel, the books of Samuel.
It's a cool story.
Okay, by the way, go ahead.
Formerly in Israel, when a man went to inquire of God, he would say, "Come, let us go to the seer." For the prophet of today was formerly called a seer. The Navi of today is formerly called a seer.
That's right. So what we have here is a very interesting insight. It's a teller of secrets. It tells me that in the time of the monarchy, what we're doing tonight is we're bringing examples where anachronism is at work, meaning we're showing examples where monarchical language and monarchical ideas are transposed into what is supposed to be the time of Moses. Here's an example. And people could say, well, it was just updated. Okay, but it shows the pen of the monarchy in the wilderness epic. And to make it very, very plain, I'll say it this way. In the time of Moses, they didn't refer to this person as a Navi. And in the time of Abraham, they certainly didn't refer to this person as a Navi. They would have called this person a seer. Now, we have three words. I'm not going to go into much detail, but we have the seer, the roe in Hebrew, the one who sees, is what we would expect to find in the earliest strata of the text. Here in Samuel, it says that this is what it should be. So it's a clue. Then we have the Navi, and then the last of all, and some of this is overlapped, but we see what is a Jose. A Jose is one who envisions. Remember the word Hazon, like the vision of Isaiah. So there is no, and this is, some people may not like this, but they wouldn't have said it this way if this text fit the time of Moses. Clearly, this text is from the monarchy, and I would propose, because of its almost exact match, we find in Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 9, how does Jeremiah receive the office of the prophet? God takes his words, and it's first person. It says, and he puts them in my mouth. That's exactly what we find in Deuteronomy. Interesting.
So then the question becomes, then, Ross, is this Jeremiah writing this into the text, referring to himself? Is he attempting to hint to the people that, hey, I'm the man, by the way? We've already speculated on the possibility that both Baruch and Jeremiah were part of the team of creating this Josianic reform. So do you think that is what's happened here? I'm not too sure how to... I
tell you, I'm currently working on what I think here, and I don't know that I have enough to say, but I will say this. At this stage, I'm clearly noticing that there is a direct correlation between the words that we find in Jeremiah, both in style, in manner, in speech, with the Deuteronomic voice and the Deuteronomic pen. They look alike, they sound alike, they feel like the same writer, which is why so many scholars date Deuteronomy to the Josianic period, to the 7th century BCE. It could be, as people have proposed, one key person who proposed this is Richard Elliott Friedman, and who wrote the Bible, at least in some iterations of that work. It's been revised several times. But one very clear association is that the person who wrote the Bible, as we have it, and updated it or redacted, the final phases would have been in that 7th century and might very well have been the two that we know the most, Baruch and Jeremiah.
And Jeremiah. Fascinating. We are now in chapter 19, Ross. Can we jump there?
We sure can.
It kicks off with, hey, listen, when you're in these settlements, these towns and homes, you shall set aside 3 cities in the land that the Lord your God is giving you to possess. You shall survey the distances. Like, these are strategically placed so that, in verse 4, the manslayer can flee there. One who has killed another unwittingly. So he did by accident, Ross, without having been his enemy in the past. For instance, and here's an example, if a man goes with his neighbor into the grove to cut wood, and his hand swings the axe to cut down the tree, and the axe head flies off the handle and strikes Jimmy so that he's dead, that man shall flee to one of these cities. Otherwise, when the distance is great, the blood avenger, all right, this is, I suppose, Jimmy's brother, pursuing the manslayer in hot anger, may overtake him and kill him, yet he did not incur the death penalty, since he had never been the other's enemy. That is why I command you, set aside 3 cities. Now it goes on to say, is there anything you want to highlight there at all?
No, you're reading from the JPS, right? Is that right?
I am.
Okay.
I am.
Okay.
Is it a little bit different with you in the Torah tablet?
Oh, yeah, and it's not worth reading again. I'll just say, if people want to look at it in the ASV, it's 118 and 119 in the Torah tablet. But go ahead. Manslayer is the word.
Manslayer enlarges your territory as he swore to your fathers and gives you the land that he promised to give to your fathers, if you faithfully observe all of the instruction that I joined. So as a reminder, by the way, this is Mosaic and you've got to do it. Walk in all of his ways, then add 3 more towns to those, when your territories expand. Thus, blood of the innocent will not be shed, bringing blood guilt upon you in the land that the Lord your God is allotting you. Now, here's a key verse that I want to unpack with you, Ross, now that we've just read all of that. Verse 11, if, however, Ross, a person who is the enemy of another lies in wait for him and sets upon him and strikes him a fatal blow and then flees to one of these towns, well, then the elders of this town shall have him brought back from there and shall hand him over to the blood avenger to be put to death. So I suppose the brother of the person who was murdered by the enemy gets to put him to death, and then apparently justice is done. Okay. So let me just go through this. Verse 11: a person who is the enemy of another,
if any man,
lies in wait for him, premeditated, right? It's saying it's premeditated, sets upon him and strikes him a fatal blow, and then flees to one of these towns. Okay, I see what's happening. So what this seems to be, and maybe it's the same, or maybe it's different in your Torah tablet, but as opposed to Jimmy who's cutting wood, or Johnny who's cutting wood in the forest, axe handle flies off the wood, it's Jimmy in the head, accidentally kills him. Accident. Johnny can run to one of these towns and be safe, right?
Let the heat pass.
Let the heat pass, and then. But here is the enemy of someone. It is premeditated murder. He lies in wait. He waits for him. He kills him, and then he tries to, I guess, pretend that it was an accident and flee to one of these towns. I see. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because the interesting thing about it is that 4Q38 in ZC Scrolls renders it slightly differently. It says, but if any man hates his neighbor, lies in wait for him, rises up against him, strikes him mortally so that he dies, and he flees from these cities, and he's fleeing from these cities, then you shall you get him and you bring him back. It's strange the way that it has done that, but I can see here now really that it's talking about premeditated murder, and it's differentiating between the two.
Right. It is. It is an interesting system. One of the things that I'd like to do is, we have different sources, if you will, about these cities of refuge. Can we get Ezra involved? Let's get him to explain. Ezra, if you could just give us sort of a kind of an overall summary of this idea as we see here in Deuteronomy 19, in Numbers 35, and Joshua chapter 20.
In Deuteronomy 19, the cities of refuge are framed as part of a just society governed by covenantal law. They're presented as a humanitarian institution, a way to protect someone who kills unintentionally from blood revenge pending fair trial. The emphasis is ethical, preventing the shedding of innocent blood. And the cities are evenly distributed to ensure accessibility, reflecting Deuteronomy's concern with equity and judicial integrity. Numbers 35, a priestly text, introduces a more rigid structure. The cities are now 6 in total, 3 on each side of the Jordan, and are explicitly Levitical cities. The law shifts toward cultic contamination. The land is defiled by blood, and only the death of the high priest can atone for unintentional killing. It's not just legal protection, it's ritual containment. Joshua 20 harmonizes these earlier traditions in narrative form. It echoes the Deuteronomic and priestly frameworks almost verbatim, suggesting a later redactional effort to unify diverging legal codes into the conquest narrative. This reflects a layered composition, where earlier independent legal traditions were woven into a synthetic historical account. So what we see is Deuteronomy giving us a law for a just society, Numbers giving us a ritual legal system for maintaining sacred space, and Joshua trying to make both fit into Israel's national story.
Yeah, that's
think
cool.
about that.
I like that. Yeah, there's some clear variations.
Yeah,
that's good. Now, listen, there's something else that's interesting about chapter 19, verse 11, and that is to say that there is another reference, if you like, to the Moses scroll. There is a conflation or perhaps a paraphrased juxtaposition of the corresponding blessings and curses, Ross, of the 4th and 10th word. Now, this is actually highly significant. We can't go into the details here, but again, it has to do with what I'm working on at the moment. We'll get there eventually when we finish Torah Pearls. We'll move on to that. But in those words, like let's go to the 4th word. It says, "You shall not kill the soul of your brother." The curse of that is, the corresponding curse is, "Cursed is the one who strikes his neighbor in secret." So that's what we have here in this verse. In the 10th word, "You shall not hate your brother in your heart." Blessed is the man who loves his neighbor. Cursed is the man who hates his brother in his heart. And then we get into, and we see something similar, by the way, in the way that Leviticus chapter 19, verses 17 and 18 sort of pulls from these as well and sort of conflates them together. Verse 14 of chapter 19 says thus, "You shall not move your countryman's landmark, Ross, set up by previous generations in the property that will be allotted to you in the land that the Lord your God is giving you to possess." Don't be doing that. Where does that come from? Is this the first time we hear about that? Well, actually, it comes from the Moses scroll, and it is, again, I think the 6th commandment, if I'm not mistaken, either the 6th or the 8th. The 6th, that there's corresponding curse to the 6th word. Cursed is the one who moves his neighbor's land boundary. The word, of course, is "You shall not steal the property of your brother."
Good catch.
Going forward from there, and we do have, I think this is represented as in 27:17. It might mention this curse of Deuteronomy, and we'll get there eventually. 15 to 18 is an elaboration of the 8th word. So 15 to 18, verse 15 to 18 says, "A single witness may not validate against a person any guilt or blame or any offense that may be committed. A case can be valid only on the testimony of 2 witnesses or more. If the man appears against another to testify maliciously and gives false testimony, Ross, against him, the 2 parties shall to dispute shall appear before the Lord, for the priest or the magistrate or the authority of the time, and the magistrate shall make thorough investigation. The man who testified is a false witness, then he has testified falsely against his fellow. You shall do to him as he schemed to do to his fellow." Well, what we have in the 8th word and the corresponding blessings and curses, "You shall not respond against your brother with a testimony of deceit, Blessed is the man who does not deal falsely and does not practice deceit with his neighbor. And then cursed is the one who takes a bribe to testify deceitfully against his associate. Ross.
Yeah, it is interesting when as you were listing these off, and I'm noticing through your eyes the associations with the text of the Moses Scroll. It is pretty cool. It's almost as if these are elaborations, maybe, on a code. I mean, it really, again, a lot of this is in the works. We're trying, just like many of our viewers are, to figure this out. If there is a scroll that's found, and it is the scroll that Moses wrote, and it does seem to be rooted in a Deuteronomy, an early strata of what we have in Deuteronomy, this kind of evidence suggests that the writer is building legal case material on a law that we find in the Moses Scroll. So it's quite interesting.
And not just that law, but a particular structure that law appears in. And again, we're going to be talking about that in greater detail another time. We are now in Deuteronomy chapter 20, unless there's anything else that you want to get out of there. But I'm ready to jump to verse 10, if that is okay. And now we're dealing with the way that battles happen and so on and so forth. Very interesting. But in verse 10, when you approach a town, Ross, if you approach a town to attack it, you shall offer it terms of peace. Now, the reason why this is a fascinating verse is because, again, it takes us to the Moses Scroll because there is something that is different in the Moses Scroll from that which is represented in Deuteronomy. In the Moses Scroll, and we're now talking about, I think it is C10. Let's see. Yes, all right. This is the way it reads.
Okay.
And we turned and we crossed the Wadi Zered, and Elohim spoke to me, saying, Arise and cross the Wadi Arnon. Today I have begun to give you Sihon, the Amorite, king of Heshbon, and his land. And we went out to meet Sihon towards Jahaz, and we smote him until no survivor remained to him. We captured all of his cities and so on and so forth. All right, but what it has in Deuteronomy chapter 2, I think, is that where we are?
Yep.
Verse 26. Let's go back there and find that. It says it a little bit differently, Ross. Just a little bit differently.
I'm ready.
It says, when I sent messages from the wilderness of Kedemot to King Sihon of Heshbon with an offer of peace as fellows, let me pass through your country, and I will keep strictly to the highway, turning off neither to the right or to the left. What food I eat, pay for it. What water we drink, we'll pay for it. Just let me pass through. But he wouldn't, so we decided that we better go to war with him. Okay, so that's what happens. And so it's altered. The text is altered, and it seems to be altered to accommodate this law here in verse 10 of chapter 20. Does that make sense to you?
It does. Let me drill down on it just a minute. I think I follow. So what we actually find is that if we read in Deuteronomy 20, there's this elaborate system of when you go to war, when you first have to offer peace, and if they say, no, we're not willing to deal, then you can do whatever you want to do. Deuteronomy 2 seems to know that. Deuteronomy 2 kind of acts like, hey, we're just peaceful bypassing and so forth, so the writer of Deuteronomy 2 is telling a story that the people know Deuteronomy 20's principles of peace, right? Is that kind of what we're saying?
Yeah.
Whereas the Moses Scroll just says, look, I'm giving you Sihon, go in and knock him out.
Yeah.
Now,
that's it.
The interesting thing, and I think we could do this kind of quickly, but Edon brings up something that scholars have noted for quite some time, and that is that there is this awkwardness about Deuteronomy 2 and Deuteronomy 20. And I looked at the notes, and I don't know what I can bring up other than, without reading a lot of it, but here's an example. The bottom line is that scholars suggest that this suggests that there is a strata where this law code of peace wasn't known. The terms of peace wasn't part of the plan. And so when the Moses scroll says, go in and knock them out, and there's no qualifier, but first you need to offer them terms of peace and so forth, it seems awkwardly out of place. Does that represent the point? Okay, do we need to? And so because it's lacking in the Moses scroll, what Edun puts forward, by the way, those who want his book, it is available. The link is going to be in the description. But it is available on Academia. It's a free download, and you can certainly get that. It's called The Valediction of Moses. So this section is fully explored beginning on page 50 and 51, and it goes into all the evidence that what we find in the Moses scroll more accurately reflects what scholars later, like very, very recently, have come to identify as the earlier version of the story where terms of peace were not offered. And that is an interesting study. I don't know how much we can get into it here.
Well, there it is. And if they respond, if it responds peaceably and lets you in, then all the people present there shall serve you at forced labor, right? See, that's a bit, we don't have time to get into that now, but I'm not sure I approve of that. If it does not surrender to you, but would join battle with you, you shall lay siege to it. And when the Lord your God delivers into your hand, you shall put all of its males to the sword. Okay, now that's, those who pick up weapons are the males. Those who fight against are, and once you engage in battle, this is the risk of war. But then it says in verse 14, but you can, however, take for your booty all of the women and the children and the livestock, and everything in your towns is spoil, and enjoy the use of your spoil, the spoil of your enemy, which the Lord your God gives you. That's a little bit.
By the way, this is what we call a harem text, where you utterly destroy, you slay all the men, you take the women. This is conquest type language, and we typically see this beginning at the pen of the Deuteronomist, as it's put. But the question becomes, is that really what God intends? I mean, this is one of the most troubling parts of the Bible. And I know the fundamentalists would say, well, it doesn't matter if it troubles you, Ross. That's what God wants. And I would counter with that he wants you to utterly kill all the men, the children, except the young girls. I mean, that just doesn't... Anyway.
That's right. So what you're referencing is the Baal Peor.
It's another one.
We talked about that. Yeah, we talked about that in detail when we dealt with that a little earlier in Deuteronomy. Don't have time to do that all again, but it is highly problematic. But evidently, at the time of Josiah, generally accepted. This is the way that you do things.
Yeah.
Thus, you shall deal with all the towns that lie very far away from you. So far away, but those that are close to you, Ross, you leave no soul alive. No soul shall remain alive. Everyone gets to die. And that's the Hittites and the Amorites and the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, as the Lord your God has commanded you, lest they lead you into doing abhorrent things, and you stand guilty before the Lord. When you engage in war and you besiege it, and by the way, don't cut down the trees, because the trees have food. All right, there's that as well.
One final point on the rules of warfare. This is what I put in my notes. Some scholars argue conquest accounts, such as Deuteronomy 2, were edited to match Deuteronomy 20's ideology.
Yeah, for
so
sure.
It's later edited in.
Yeah. Then we get Ross. Oh my word! And this is the way that our Torah portion wants to end. But good heavens, this is highly rated on my list of. Let's just call them very strange and weird, bizarre texts.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. And on that list, I'll just tell you, there is, of course, we dealt with the situation of the spirit of jealousy. Going to get some dirt and some bit of this and that, and put it in the water of lustration with the ashes of the heifer, and make my wife drink it and see what happens to her, just in case she's been unfaithful. Super weird text. The other one is one we've already dealt with as well, the two pigeons. You're going to kill one, you're going to dip the other one in the blood and then let it go, all this sort of stuff.
Yeah. This is another one of those.
This is another one of those within the Torah. If if in the land that the Lord your God is assigning to you to possess, someone slain is found in the open, out in the field, to the identity of the slayer has not been known, your elders and magistrates shall go out and measure the distance from the corpse to the nearby towns. The elders of the town nearest to the corpse shall then take a heifer which has never been worked. It doesn't have to be a red heifer, apparently, Ross, but it is a heifer that hasn't been worked.
Heifer.
Just a heifer. It can be any color, which has never pulled a yoke. And the elders of that town shall bring the heifer down to an ever-flowing wadi, which is not tilled or sown. There, in the wadi, there shall break the neck of the heifer, cut off its head.
That's got to be a hard job to break a heifer's neck.
Not going to be easy. Even more difficult than a donkey, I think, which is the last time we read about this. Sons of Levi shall come forward. The Lord your God has chosen them to minister to him and to pronounce blessing in the name of Jehovah, which is an interesting little insertion there. And because we don't have the pronouncements of the blessings in here, so it's been cut out. We've already talked about that. Every lawsuit and case of assault is subject to their ruling. Then all the elders of the town nearest to the corpse shall wash their hands over the heifer whose neck was broken in the wadi, and they shall make this declaration, Ross. They will say, our hands did not shed this blood, nor did our eyes see it done. Absolve, O Lord, your people Israel, whom you redeemed, and do not let guilt for the blood of the innocent remain among your people Israel, and they shall be absolved of the blood guilt. Thus you will remove from your midst guilt from the blood of the innocent, for you will be doing what is right in the sight of the Lord. It doesn't make for a very good sort of mystery crime TV series, Ross, if this is all you get to do.
No, and I
what
keep
a detective film.
Yeah, I wonder what is the view? What good does it do? Let's say that this is the way they did it. Why break the heifer's neck? I mean, what does that have to do with, why not just wash your hands and say, we had nothing to do with this? You're like, well, that's not enough. We got to break a heifer's neck here.
Yeah, we got to kill a heifer. A particular heifer has these requirements, and it has to be done down by a wadi that is flowing, that doesn't have a field sown by it or anything. There's all of these requirements, so it all means something to them at the time to effectuate this atonement, I guess. And this is what needs to be done. Super strange.
It is super strange. Hey, look, next week, we're going to be getting into some stuff on, let me just give you a couple of highlights. You ready?
Go on.
War brides.
Yeah, man, the way it kicks off next week is another hard one, yeah.
Oh, man. Firstborn
we're gonna have to deal with it.
Inheritance.
Yep.
Rebellious son, and the hanging on a tree. I'm telling you, this is some interesting stuff, and I'm going to share something right now. I want people to know that next week I'm going to bring in something interesting, connecting this to the Gospels.
Cool,
something that Jesus of Nazareth claims in Matthew and Luke, which we believe, some scholars believe that's the Gospel of Q, claims his enemies were saying about him, and I'm going to put people right on that spot. And I think it's going to be surprising. I'll tell you, man, I'm into some interesting studies right now. All right.
Key to say that's where we're going to be. And that's it. That is absolutely it. We have gone pretty long and it's time to stop, but we're going to be picking up this time again next week. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. And thanks for joining us. Like, subscribe, comment. Love the comments. All right. And we'll be talking to you very, very soon. Ezra, take us on out.
That wraps up this week's deep dive into Shofetim. Thanks for sticking with us as we sifted through judges, kings, Levites, and cities of refuge, all with a sharp eye on the text and its layers. Now, don't forget, Ross is heading into the after-class discussion where members of the Yakad can join the Zoom call and jump right into the conversation. If you're not yet part of the Yakad community, no worries. You can still watch the discussion live on YouTube, and the link's right down there in the description. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed the episode, give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what's coming next. Shabbat Shalom from all of us here at Torah Pearls. We'll see you next time.